Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Nitzavim, and we're moving on now towards the very end. We're in the final chapters of the book of Deuteronomy, the final chapters of Moses' life, and the final statements, speeches that he is making to the nation of Israel. And in the very end of chapter 29, we see a description of what will happen to the land at a time of exile or a time of punishment. It begins with what will happen if there are people within the nation of Israel who turn their backs against God, who worship idols, who do not follow the commandments, and the promise that they will then be cursed. And then we have, starting in verse 21, a description of the response. Okay, we have a land that's been destroyed, desolate, barren. What will happen later? And here we have in verse 21, and later generations will ask, the children who succeed you, and foreigners who come from distant lands, and see the plagues and diseases that the Lord has inflicted upon that land, all its soil devastated by sulfur and salt, beyond sowing and producing, no grass growing in it, just like the upheaval of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which the Lord overthrew in his fierce anger. All nations will ask, why did the Lord do this to the land? Wherefore that awful wrath? Okay? Now, this is so amazing, because if we talk about how the Bible sets down the roadmap for us and gives us a vision of what history will look like, not just, this is what's going to happen, but what will be the consequences of the various things we do, the sinning, the obeying God, the process from settling in the land of Israel to exile and back again to redemption. And this is part of that process. We have a situation where the nation has been expelled and the land is a mess. Now, I don't know if any of you have read the book Innocents Abroad. It's a book that Mark Twain wrote in the 1860s. He was an American, very famous American author of the 19th century. And at one point, he took a trip through Europe and to the Middle East. And when he gets to Israel, he describes the land he sees in the most terrible terms, very similar to this. He talks about it's barren and there's no settlement and that the people roaming around full of bandits and there's anarchy and there's no trees and there's no vegetation and the way he describes the land, he actually quotes, I believe, Zechariah, and he says, this is as the prophet said, it will be a desolate, terrible land, okay? And so when I read this, I'm reminded also of what Mark Twain wrote, okay? But of course, he was writing in the 1860s, and he had no optimism. He didn't read the rest of Zechariah, okay? He had no prophetic vision that understood that if this could come true, then so could the redemption that is promised. Okay? So we have this situation which is terrible, and as soon as you have a situation where the nations ask, why did the Lord do thus to this land? Therefore, wherefore that awful wrath? Okay? There is here a tremendous potential for a desecration of God's name. Okay? Because there's a potential for the nations to say, the Jewish people, they say, well, they're the chosen nation, but they can't be too chosen because look at their land and it's all over and that's it. And if you think about it, for centuries of replacement theology, this became a backbone of that theology. The proof, as you say, look at the land, look at the nation of Israel now, they're destitute, they're all over the place. God has surely forgotten about his people. Okay? But what's the answer? The answer that should be given to this nation is they will be told because they forsook the covenant that the Lord God of their fathers made with them. Okay? That this is a punishment. Does this mean that God forgot them? Well, I don't know, because at the end of this, in verse 27, the Lord uprooted them from their soul in anger, fury, and great wrath, and cast them into another land, as is still the case. Okay? So again, this is not a very happy ending. But then you get to chapter 30. And then we have that promise, a promise that has carried us through the ages. When all things befall you, the blessing and the curse that I've set before you, and you take them to heart clearly, etc., etc., what do we say here? In verse 3, the Lord, your God, will restore your fortunes and take you back in love. He will bring you together again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you. and goes on, and the Lord your God will bring you to the land that your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he will make you more prosperous and more numerous than your fathers. Reversal. In other words, when you see the land in its greatest desolation, you cannot end where Mark Twain ended. You have to realize that this is temporary, that there will come a time where God will then restore the people. He will gather them back in love. Anger will have dissipated. Love will have returned. God has never forsaken his people. Like a parent who is angry at his child, he punishes his child for wrongdoing, and he is angry. But after a few hours, the anger dissipates, and the love is able to shine through again, and then the parent is able to give the child a hug and bring him back and hope that once again that relationship, that amazing relationship, will be restored. But there's never a severing of the relationship between parent and child. There is never a severing of the relationship between the God of Israel and the people of Israel. And of course, it is the land of Israel that represents all of that. When that relationship is in trouble, then God sends us out from the land. But when the relationship is being restored, God will return us back into the land. And that is, thank God, what we are witnessing, what we are taking part in today, the fulfillment of these very promises that we see in Deuteronomy 30. We have come back to the land. God has gathered us from the four corners of the earth to which he scattered us. He has brought us back. And I must say, indeed, we are more prosperous for sure. We are even more numerous than our forefathers. Today, the largest concentration of Jews anywhere in the world is in the state of Israel, and more than half of the Jewish people worldwide today are living in Israel. Of course, we want 100% of Jews from all over the world to come back to Israel, but we believe we are in that process. That as God is gathering us in love, he is gradually showing his love to even the most assimilated Jews. And little by little, we must have patience. This may take a lot of time, but little by little, we believe all Jews will return to God and ultimately will return to the land of Israel. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.